Greetings to everybody at the Vero Beach Museum of Art at the Open Studio Day. I really wish I was there with you. My name is Lynn Berkowitz, and I'm very excited to tell you a little bit about the highlights coming ahead in two art appreciation classes that will be offered this spring. One is Subject and Style in Focus, and the other is Artful Atmosphere. Each of the classes are 5 weeks long. They'll be offered online. And today I'm very excited to share just some of the highlights of the diverse range of artists, media, materials, and isms that we will be covering over both of these classes. So I'd like to get started and to take a peek of what's coming ahead. In Subject and Style and Focus, which begins March 23rd, we will be looking at portraiture, specifically with a focus on fashion. So everything from hair, makeup, the clothes, the shoes, the hose that men and women are wearing will give us some new insights into how we look at portraits. The workaday world, so a strand of genre painting where we'll focus on people at work, time and motion, both in sculpture and in painting, and how that illusion of time and motion is so visually important in many works of art. We'll look at two different types of architecture painting. One will focus on the exterior elements and architectural details, and the other will be looking inside at interior design. So let's take a peek at just one example from each of these weeks to get a sense of where we're going. So one of the portraits that we'll be looking at is this Anger portrait, and we will certainly be looking at her, at this incredible figure that's in front of us, but we'll be looking at also and exploring all of the changes that Anger made over the 12 years he worked on this portrait. And one of the key things that was changed, on top of her placement and how she moved around and moved from the side and into the center of this composition, who she is, what is she wearing, but also in those 12 years, how much fashion had changed and evolved, especially for somebody in her social realm. So there's lots to discover about the economy and trade of the time and the context of the portrait that informs this persona that we're seeing in front of us. And we'll also look at connections. And one of those connections is looking at the contemporary photographer Cindy Sherman in her Untitled number 204, where she references this particular painting and takes it and evolves as part of it. And it's, again, not so much in Cindy Sherman's case of self-portraiture. She always says, I don't take self-portraits. I'm transforming myself and constructing the persona, and how we can look at how Cindy Sherman approaches a contemporary art form and look back to understanding another time, another place, and the way of constructing persona. In genre painting, especially focusing on the workaday world, one example we'll be delving into is the MacArthur Fellow Genius, awarded artist of 2021, Jordan Castile, and we will look at more in depth this moment and slice of time of Falou, who she is, the work she does. And one of the things I was particularly struck with is the curator from the new museum, who cites Jordan Castile as her approach to celebrating vocations that he said get too quickly marginalized because of what we think and how we put people in stereotype. And he goes on to say, that Ms. Castile pointed out to him, we tend to think of a guy working on a laptop in a cafe as an entrepreneur. but not someone selling t-shirts or statues on the street. So we're going to be taking a look at people at work, again, from some more historical times to contemporary times, and the different ways artists represent that strand of genre painting. Time and motion. So we're going to be looking at not only the techniques and the strategies that artists use to create the illusion of motion happening in a place where that it can't possibly happen on a two-dimensional surface. So what are the different strategies and techniques and materials used, but also how that is informed by the philosophy. And in this case, Bala as being a member of the futurism group, what that ism means and how important that notion of dynamic movement spoke to the industrialization of Italy at the time, and the understanding that things are moving, things are exploding, and that the art of the time should express that. So here we see, and I'll let you know, I have not cropped this image. This is the image. We get to see this focus on somebody walking a dog on a leash, but this dog doesn't have 4 legs. This dog, I didn't count them, but has, at least 20 legs, a tail that isn't one tail, but 9 tails. So how repetition, how the blurring, how the waving of the illusion of the waving of the leash itself adds to that dynamic thrust forward, and the sense of time swooshing ahead. So not only futurism will be looking at that sense of movement and the different ways that artists can represent that. And the idea of architectural painting or architecture painting, looking at the way architecture can play a role. And in this case, with the Stuart Davis at the Hôtel de France, the architecture is the portrait. It's the portrait of the architecture. How often architectural details form a backdrop, or are used as the device, as we see here, even a little bit, this sense of adding depth through perspective. So the character of a city and how it comes forward, the buildings that he chooses to represent and how he does it. And with that, jaunty composition and the brilliant palette. So how Stuart Davis does this, we'll be looking again at images that come from different places, different time frames. So this is Stuart Davis and his 18-month visit to Paris. This is one of the first paintings he did. It always remained one of his favorite from this time. And we'll see how this also compares to a variety of other ways that other artists have represented cities from different places. And the last session of the class, we're going to be going inside and thinking about interiors and interior designs. And in this case, looking at the Paul Cézanne, the still life with plaster Cupid of about 1894, we'll be looking at Cézanne, and we'll also look at other works of art and other ways that interiors have been shown that provides the character of the people who are living there. So even though this particular painting is not peopled with people, we see evidence of a space. And what does that tell us? And how is he using space? How is he using his palette? How do you feel in looking at this is something we'll be exploring as we go into a variety of interiors, and from calm to chaotic to disquiet to sublime and quite elegant. So the last class of that session, or the last session of that class, we will focus on interior design and decoration and what that looks like. From there, we move on to artful atmosphere. So what does that mean? It means we are going to look at a variety of paintings. The first session of the class will focus on the sun and sunlight. The second will focus on moon and moonlight, a lot of paintings that have moons in them, rain and snow, fog and smog, and how important smog was, especially to the Impressionists, but we'll get a sense of what the atmosphere did to inspire artists, and windswept. So we'll be thrust into all kinds of storms and windy conditions. And that class will begin on April 27th. So in our first session, we are going to look at the sun and the idea of the sun and sunlight. And one artist that we'll be looking at is a rock in the Joseph Joachim, a rock in the Baltic Sea near Stockholm, Sweden, East Europe. There's no date on it. And this is in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art. So what that sun does both compositionally and also emotionally within the framework of this landscape, Joachim might be one of those artists you might not be very familiar with, but we're going to find out more about him and how at the age of 71, he started painting and drawing landscapes, both real from his travels and both as well as imaginary. So the swirl, the swoop, the patterning, the lines, the colors, and the writing that's also part and parcel of the image is something we'll be delving into, finding out about this artist and his depiction of different landscapes. Well, also, and when I talk about isms, I mean, we will be looking at works of art from naturalism and realism, surrealism, which is an example here, right on through to contemporary art. So here is Remedios Vero, the Spanish artist who lived in Mexico and worked in Mexico. And we will be looking at is one of the pieces, this stellar porridge, and what is happening here in this amazing lab-like structure she's constructed. There's a female figure sitting on a chair. If you can follow the pipes, there's stardust coming down the pipe into this grinder. And so the word porridge is, it's like the stardust is being turned into some sort of porridge that is now being spoon-fed to the crescent moon. So horoscopes, moon, lunar sightings, and also a lot of those connections and interpretations and meaning is going to be a lot of fun to go explore as we look at this Vero, among others. Another ism that we'll be jumping into is one that's called Cubofuturism, which is Malevich, a Russian artist. This is Morning in the Village After Snowstorm. So this is going to be during the week that we're going to be looking at paintings filled with rain and paintings filled with snow. And this is from 1912. And we'll be looking at the transition also of an artist who is bringing, looking back to his personal history as well through the lens of what he's been absorbing with contemporary art at the time. So the influences, the inspiration, but also from where he came from and how he looks at a particular scene. And this one is going to also give us a hint when we're going to spend our time looking at paintings that feature fog and smog. This one is by Claude Monet, The Houses of Parliament, and the title, part of the title is Effect of Fog. And this is when Monet goes to London, and he is doing literally 100 drawings and paintings through different times of day, through different weather and effects and views of the Thames River, while he's at looking at the House of Parliament. He's actually at the St. Thomas Hospital across the way. So this is the other interesting thing, is he's also going to break with some of the assumptions we have about impressionist artists who do everything outside in front of the objects that they're painting. He is drawing, he is painting over and over and over again, but these canvases are then taken to Giverny, back to France, where he actually will work on them over a couple of years and finish them in his studio in Giverny. So here is an artist who is fascinated by the effects of the weather, of the effects of light, how light can move through. And it's not so much the view of the object, or in this case, the building, but it's also the view of the veil that the fog itself forms. So we'll have a lot of fun plowing our way through fogs and smogs. And the last session of this class of Artful Atmosphere, we will look at windswept. So we'll be thrust into storms, as I said. And here we have the chilling look at The Lifeline by Winslow Homer. And in one way, its focus is on this brand new or relatively new life-saving device to help people stranded from boats and getting them safely to the land. But the other, it's about the fierce winds. It's about these weather conditions. And it is about the story of the impact. You know, why is that red scarf against the man's face that we can't even see, this anonymous lifesaver who is, if it wasn't for what's called the Beach's Boy, B-U-O-Y, that this woman hopefully will be saved and brought to safety. So this is just a few snapshots of what we'll be covering, and I hope to see you in the classes this spring. Look forward to it.